Hey guys, how we doing? It's Mr. Chavla. I'm back. So in the previous three videos, I went over the multiple choice portion, 8 questions per video, the first 24 questions of the June 2016 Common Core Algebra 2 exam. And in this video, I'm going to be going over the key for numbers 25 through 32. That's part 2 of the June 2016 Common Core Algebra 2 exam. Those are the short answer multiple choice, the short answer 2-point questions, okay? And again, my name is Mr. Chavla. You could also call me Mr. C. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the short answer now. Number 25 is where we're going to start. So solve for x. First thing, so we got 1 over x minus 1/3 is equal to negative 1 over 3x. The first thing you guys are going to notice is, well, there are a few things you can notice first, but the first thing you want to know is that the denominator cannot be 0. So x can't equal 0 over here, x can't equal 0, and here 3 times x cannot equal 0 because we cannot divide by 0. If we divide by 3 on both sides, here we get the same thing saying x cannot equal 0. So basically, we want to get an answer that, oops, I didn't mean to erase that part. We got to get it, we want to make sure we don't get 0 as one of our answers in case we get more than one answer. And if we do, we want to check again. So the next thing we want to do now is we want to make all the denominators the same. So here we got 3x. If I multiply both sides by x, because whatever I do to the denominator, I must do to the numerator to keep the fractions equivalent, then I get 3x in the denominator. If I multiply 3 on both sides and 1 over x on the top and bottom, that gives me 3x in the denominator. So if I multiply the 3 by 1, I get 3 over 3x minus 1 times x is just x over 3x equals negative 1, and I'll keep that in the numerator over 3x with all the denominators the same. Now I don't need the denominators anymore. I look at the numerators, set them equal to each other. 3 minus x equals negative 1. Now you might be able to tell that, okay, how much do I have to subtract from 3 to get negative 1? 4. 3 minus 3 is 0, and 3 minus 4 is negative 1. You want to solve the equation, you could go ahead. I mean, we just did, but if you want to do more work than that, sure, but it's not necessary. We know that 3 minus 4 is negative 1, and that's our solution. It's a good idea to check, but I have pretty good confidence. You could use your calculator too, all right? Moving right along to number 26. That was a rational equation, okay? Number 26 is describe how a controlled experiment, it's a type of statistical study, can be created to examine the effect of ingredient X in a toothpaste. Okay, so controlled experiments are created to determine cause and effect relationships. They're the only type of study that could be used to determine cause and effect relationships. And they always involve two things. They involve taking a random sample of people or volunteers and splitting them into 2 equal groups. So split a large number of people, and here's the important part, randomly, because if it's not random, that messes everything up. Randomly into 2 equal size groups. I'll just say 2 equal groups. Okay? The ingredient X is known as the treatment. That's the one we're trying to determine the effect of. So we need the treatment group or the experimental group, right? That group, I'll just call that the experimental group. Here, let's write a complete sentence. So in the experimental group, that's the first one. Well, so I'm going to put a bullet point. In the treatment group or experimental group, they mean the same thing. Those are the people that get treatment. And what is the treatment? Ingredient X. So people will brush their teeth or use toothpaste with ingredient X. So in the experimental group, people will use toothpaste with ingredient X. The next group is called the control group. That's our comparison group that we want to compare with to see if there was a difference between using ingredient X and not. So in the other group is known as the control group. People are going to use toothpaste without ingredient X. and there should be the same number of people in each group. Let's say 10 in each group. People, let's see if I could fit that here. Use toothpaste. Without ingredient X, the magical ingredient X, whatever it's supposed to do. I have no clue. I'm running out of space. And then, of course, you're going to compare the results between the two groups at the end, but we don't need to say that. That goes without saying. Okay, let me fix that. Okay, so the controlled experiment always involves two things. Equally split people into two groups. On one side, you have the treatment group. I'm trying to like make it fit here. Treatment group, people get treatment. Other side, you have control group, no treatment. You randomly split people into two equal groups, compare the results at the end, right? People who got treatment versus people who did not. Okay, so let's make sure we match that criteria. And it must be random splitting, otherwise it's not a proper controlled experiment. I'm going to make this a little smaller. I'm pretty sure you could still read that, right? So describe how a controlled experiment can be used to or created to determine the effect of ingredient X in a toothpaste. Split a large number of people randomly, that's number one, into two equal sized groups. In the experimental group, people will use toothpaste with ingredient X, and in the control group, people will use toothpaste without ingredient X. Really didn't matter the ingredient X or what it's, do you know how to design a controlled experiment? So you want to look up the different types of statistical studies. All right, I would highly recommend that you Google types of statistical studies, as there's the experiment or controlled experiment or experimental studies. They all mean the same thing. There's surveys, there's observational studies. All right, so look these up. Make sure you know the differences between these three and how they work, okay? I'm moving on to the next question, 27. Determine if x minus 5 is a factor of 2x cubed minus 5x squared minus 7x minus 10. Is it a factor, yes or no? And explain your answer. So guys, very simple. If we were to factor this into, I don't know, 2x, I'm just going to make something up, plus 1, x minus 7, 4x minus 9 equals 0, right? These are the factors. If x minus 7 is a factor, we get x equals 7 is a 0. So very simply, if x equals 5 results in an output of 0, then when x equals 5 is substituted into the polynomial 2x cubed minus 4x squared minus 7x minus 10, you should end up with a value of 0. You obtain a value of 0. I really wish they used function notation for this polynomial. It would have made it so much easier. I would have just said f of x, p of x. So because what it does is it's going to give us the remainder when we divide. Whatever we get will be the remainder when we divide the polynomial by x minus 5. And what we might want to include for some work is that x minus 5 equals 0. X equals 5 will be a 0 of the polynomial then, if x minus 5 is a factor. Because if it's not the case, then x minus 5 cannot be a factor. So we're going to substitute 2 times 5 cubed minus 4 times 5 squared minus 7 times 5 minus 10. Is it equal to 0, yes or no? Now, I'll just put the whole thing in the calculator. We don't need to do this one by one. All right, wrong video. I'm working on uploading one of the earlier questions for this exam. I meant to go to this screen. So we're going to go to the scientific calculator and just substitute the appropriate numbers. So we're substituting 5 for x in the expression. So 2 times 5 cubed minus 4 times 5 squared minus 7 times 5 minus 10, and we get 105. We get 105, guys. That's not what we want at all. I'm trying to get this all to fit on the screen. I think, oh, my window was too narrow. I hope I didn't miss out on anything. Let me make this a little smaller. Okay, let me make this smaller, guys. It's too big. I should have made the screen larger. So we get 105 as our, you see it says answers show up on this side. Our output is 105. So basically, we get 105, which is not equal to 0. The remainder, when we divide the polynomial by x minus 5, will actually be 105, which last time I checked was not equal to 0. But let's not even say that. Let's just say that we'll just say since x equals 5 resulted in 105. Let's not even say that. We know that at this point substituting x equals 5 resulted in 105. Substituting x equals 5 and simplifying resulted in 105, not 0. Hence, or therefore, x minus 5 is not a factor. All right, there were a lot of ways that we could have done this. There were ways we could have actually done this faster, but I kind of started one way and flew with it. That's number 27, all right? You could have said it actually a lot more, with a lot less words. Let me minimize me now. All right, this is, if you look up the remainder theorem, you could just said, when you use the remainder theorem, the remainder is 105, not 0, so x minus 5 is not a factor. It probably would have been a lot less words. You could have used division and see that you don't get a remainder of 0, long division, synthetic division. All right, but this is basically what we got. So let's read through it, make sure it checks out. If x minus 5 is a factor, if it is a factor, let me not even do that. If it's a factor, then when x equals 5 is substituted into 2x cubed minus 4x squared minus 7x minus 10, you obtain a value of 0. We did not obtain a value of 0, we obtained a value of 105. So substituting x equals 5 and simplifying resulted in 105, not 0. Then x minus 5 is not a factor. That's all there is to it, guys. This is a complete and correct response, promise. There are many ways that this could have been done. This is one out of, I've got to say, at least 4 or 5 ways, maybe even more. All right, moving on to 28. On the axes below, graph one cycle of a cosine function with amplitude 3, period pi over 2, and midline y equals -1, and passing through the point 0, 2. So guys, first thing, and also just one cycle. So if you graph more than one cycle, you lose points of this cosine function. So one cycle only. So I'm going to start at 0, 2, the y-intercept. And we're just going up by 1 each time on the y-axis. All right, so this would be 1, -1, -2, -3, -4, and I'm not going to go below that, guys, because look, if the midline is y equals -1, so if here we have our midline, and the amplitude is 3, that means the maximum has to be 3 units above the midline. So this is our maximum point. Our max is 2. Our midline, our max y value is 2, right? Is y equals -1, which, so as we go down from the, so we can only go down from the maximum back to the midline, right? Then our minimum has to be 3 units below the midline. So 3 up from -1, we get the maximum. 3 down from the minimum, we get the minimum is y equals -4. And these are all y values, right? So let's get that in. So it goes down from the maximum, it can't go above 2. The same way, ooh, it cannot go above 2, and it cannot go below -4. So that's why I'm not labeling any farther. So it goes, one cycle is just going to go from the maximum down to the midline, farther down to the minimum, 3 down here, then it has to return back to the midline, and then one more time back up to the maximum before repeating another cycle. All right, and let's just make sure we got these points here. There were other ways we could have drawn this, but this was the way I found easiest. They said it had to, and we have to, of course, label the period, pi over 2. We don't have to label the entire scale. As long as we label it properly on one part of the axis, we're good to go. So let's make sure we hit the criteria, and I'll check them off. It's one cycle of a cosine function with amplitude 3, period pi over 2, midline y equals -1, and pass through 0, 2. That's all there was to it. There were other ways to do it, many ways. This was one way, okay? So that's all they asked us to do. And we didn't even have to come up with the equation. I'll neaten this out a little bit. You didn't have to write this part down. I'll write it down just so that we can see it, okay? So if the midline, our C value of the curve is -1, right? The amplitude A is equal to 3. The absolute value of A. We don't know if A is positive or negative. If you were to work it out, you'd see it's positive. Then the min is equal to C minus the absolute value of A, midline. This is our amplitude, by the way, right? Amp. And they said it right here. That becomes -1 minus 3. So the minimum is -4. The max is equal to C plus the absolute value of A. That's -1 plus 3. And that's 2. So if we put it together, the maximum is 2. The highest point on the graph, it will reach y value-wise, is 2. The minimum, the middle y value, midline, is equal to -1. And the minimum is -4. It just goes down, it goes up 3 from -1 to 2, down 3 from -1 to -4. That's what we mean by amplitude minus midline to get the, midline minus amplitude to get the minimum, midline plus amplitude to get the maximum, just in case you need to see that. That's all there was to it, guys. And also remember to label the scale and proper shape of the graph. All right, next question, 29. A suburban high school has a population of 1,376 students. The number of students who participate in sports is 649. The number of students who participate in music is 433. If the probability that a student participates in either sports or music is this, 974 over 1,376, which was the total, what's the probability that a student participates in both sports and music? So, if you remember the rule, guys, the probability, S is for sports, M is for music. The probability of S or M, sports or music, is simply equal to the probability of sports plus the probability of music, subtract the intersection, the probability of sports and music. That's the one we're solving for, right? We have the number. This is out of the total, which is 1376. So that means 974 students participate in sports or music. Then the probability is 974 over 1376. The probability of that they're in sports is going to be 649 out of the total, which is 1376. The probability that their music is 433 out of 1376. and we just want the probability of S and M. Okay, I'm going to add the 649 plus 433 to get 1082. So 974 over 1376 is equal to 1082 over 1376 minus probability of S and M. I'm going to now subtract, I'm going to add probability of S and M to both sides. And at the same time, I'm going to subtract this 974 minus 1376 from the other side. And all I need to do is subtract 1082 minus 974. And I get 108. So the probability that the person will be in both sports and music, that's the intersection, is 108 over 1376. I would not recommend changing this to a decimal. If you wanted to simplify the fraction, you could, but they nowhere said you had to do that. So this will be a complete and correct response, my friends. Check it out. Hope it's large enough for you to see. I'm sorry, I took myself out. I didn't come back. Hi. Hey there. I'm just chilling. I'm okay. And I'm still here. You hear me? You couldn't see me. Okay. I think I left at some point so that you could see the whole window. And that is, you could see the whole window with me now. Okay. So moving on to question 30. You want to know, for this question, you wanted to make sure you knew about probability rules, intersections, unions. That's all there was really to it, guys. It was not that hard. Just had to understand what they were asking for. Next one, I like this one. The directrix of a parabola whose equation is 12 times y plus 3 equals x minus 4 square has the equation y equals negative 6. I'll pull out the highlighter. Or I'll just write it down, guys. So the directrix is y equals negative 6. So if we have an xy grid, I'm sorry, let me fix this. If we have an xy grid, on this side I'll do the grid is negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So negative 1, negative 6 is our directrix, y equals negative 6. All right, and I'll even color code that so that we could see that this is not the x-axis. I didn't put arrows on the axis. So this is the directrix y equals negative 6, and we won't need to go below that. Now, they want that's the directrix. Find the coordinates of the focus. That's going to be a single point. What we'll do is we'll just convert this equation. We'll convert this equation into vertex form. This equation right here, we're going to convert into vertex form. We could have done it without that, but I don't know how much you know. So if I have 12 times y plus 3 equals x minus 4 square, what I want to do is very simply multiply both sides by 1/12, because I don't want to divide by 12. So when I multiply both sides by 1/12, that's the same as dividing by 12, will cause the coefficients to cancel out, right? So that'll be, and then this will just go in front here, and I'm not going to distribute or anything. So the new equation will just become y plus 3 equals 1/12 x minus 4 square. Then I subtract 3 on both sides. I get y equals 1/12 x minus 4 square minus 3. Now, if you know about the focus, not the focus, the vertex form of a parabola, y equals a x minus h squared plus k, you know that the vertex coordinate, the x coordinate is 4. It's the opposite of whatever you see here. Since it's negative 4, it's positive 4 in the vertex. And then outside the parentheses, right here, you use the same sign of what you see. So the y coordinate is negative 3 of the vertex. All right? You want to make sure you understand vertex form equation of a parabola. So now the next thing I'm going to do is plot the vertex. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and it goes down here to negative 3. Pat. So if I look now, the parabola, since we have a positive a value and it's not supposed to go in the direction of the directrix or touch the directrix, it's going to open upwards. Now, every point on the parabola, the definition is, by definition, has to be equidistant, same distance from the focus as it is from the directrix. From -3 to -6, the vertex is 3 units below, I'm sorry, the directrix is 3 units below the vertex. Therefore, the focus should be 3 units above the vertex, because the vertex has to be equidistant from focus and directrix. If you go up 3 from y equals -3, you get y equals 0, because it's at -3, the y value, so to go up 3, you get 0, but the x coordinate's the same. So I use green for the focus, and this is up 3. Focus has coordinates 4, 0, and I will write it nice and big here. No, not like that. I'll just write it over here, the answer. So focus, I honestly think that should get full credit, except for we have to state the coordinates. And let's neaten that out a little bit. Nice little comma. I think we're done. Let me neaten that out, guys. I don't like the way that came out. I'm sorry. I'm being fussy. Focus is 4, 0. What just happened to that parentheses? 40 is our focus. Sorry guys, this is getting on my nerves. Our focus is 40. There we go. And here's our final answer. That is a complete and correct response. And now we are going to move on to the next question. Our focus is 40. Let's make sure we answer the question. The directrix of a parabola is y equals -6. Find the coordinates of the focus. So we had to find the vertex. Then we found the focus is 4, 0. Okay, next question. 31. Algebraically prove that x cubed plus 9 over x cubed plus 8 is equal to 1 over plus 1 over x cubed plus 8. There were a lot of ways to do this. I'm going to show you guys 2 different ways. One way is you start with the original expression, x cubed plus 9 over x cubed plus 8, and then you think, okay, this 1, I have to have x cubed plus 8. What could I do with this 9? I could break the 9 into 8 plus 1. And then I'm like, okay, but the x cubed plus 8 divided by x cubed plus 8 is 1. So I'm going to group the x cubed plus 8 together. Then, so I could even put parentheses here. The two, what I have in parentheses, I have one of them here. And then I didn't have to put this parentheses here, but I did just so we could separate them. Then, so the one that I had in yellow, the x cubed plus 8, will be the first terms I have here. And then the one which I have in, I guess, pink, will also be over 1 over x cubed plus 8. Because you could break up fractions like that as long as you don't change the denominator. And then what's x cubed plus 8 divided by itself is just 1. And the other one stays the same. And if I just keep putting equal signs, then this gives us the final equation that so I'll just say therefore x cubed plus 9, I don't know if this part was necessary, over x cubed plus 8 is equal to 1 plus 1 over x cubed plus 8. I believe that was one of, if not the easiest way to do it, but we could also have used long division, which is not really that long of a process in this case because there are only 2 terms in the binomial on top, binomial on the bottom. So get this if you need to. I'm going to do the long division method. Actually, nah, let's just move on. The long division method is simple. If you guys followed along the previous videos I did, long division will be a joke for this one. It'll be nothing because it was we did like much harder versions of this even in the multiple choice section. So I'm gonna move along, okay? And there's so many other tutorials on videos. You don't have to see this one. You don't have to see me long division. There's so many people who did it for this question. So I'm moving on to 32. A house purchased for $100,000 5 years ago was just sold for $135,000, assuming exponential growth. Approximate the annual, that means yearly growth rate, to the nearest whole number, the nearest percent. So basically what we got is this. You should be able to tell that if we go from 100,000 to 135,000, that's 35% increase, just like if we went from 100 to 135. But we could also just, that's for the 5-year growth, right? So then if you, that gives us 1.35 to the 1/5. But here's how it would look like. It's 100,000 times 1 plus the growth rate as a decimal to the 5th time ended up being equal to $135,000 because 5 years later it was sold for $135,000. Pretty good. We divide both sides by 100,000 and you're going to get the 5-year growth factor, which is 1.35. That means 35% growth in 5 years. Now, you could either raise both sides to the 1/5 power, or I just spit on my notepad. That's disgusting. I'm sorry. Or you could take the 5th root on both sides. Usually when we're thinking of like exponential models and stuff like this, we end up using fractional exponents, but let's just keep it simple. So the 5th root and the 5th power cancel, and I get 1 plus r is equal to the 5th root of 1.35, which if I use the calculator, I want to take the 5th root of 1.35 and I get 1.0619. I don't need to go farther than that. 1.0619. 1.0619. Got it. Okay, so 1 plus r is approximately equal to 1.0619. You could tell right from here that's about 6.19 or 6.2 or 6% growth. But if you want to take it a step farther and just subtract 1 on both sides, you get 0.0619. That's equal to, if you multiply by 100, 6.19%. If you want to, and it's set to the nearest percent, so I'll write the final answer in a different color, let's say green. The annual growth rate is 6%. All right, that's our annual growth rate. There were a few other ways you could have done this, but they will all basically come down to some version of this. Okay? Now, moving on to no, we're not going to question 33 because that's for the next video. Okay, so guys, study, review the video, do what you need to do the best you possibly can in your class and your exams. I wish the best for you. If you have any questions, ask. I am here for you. Ask your teacher. They should be there for you. Ask your friends. Ask any peer tutors you have. Search online. They're all over the place, okay? There are other great videos too. Whatever it takes, right? Give yourself every possible advantage. And ask me. I'll be more than happy to help you out, okay? So if you have any questions, let me know. Any comments, any feedback, I'm more than happy to hear it. And if you like the video, please hit like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. If not, we're cool. It's cool. I mean, I'll go cry in a corner, but I'll get over it eventually in another lifetime. Okay, anyway, guys, on a serious note, please do the best. Thank you so much for sticking with me here, and I'll talk to you and I'll see you soon. Bye. Good luck.